You've heard of say yes to the dress. Well, how about say yes to the marriage? Hi, I'm Teresa, Tomeo, co-host of The Catholic View for Women. Our program gives you news and views for women, but from a truly Catholic perspective. Joining me on today's segment, of course, my regular co-hosts, Astrid, Bennett, Gutierrez, and Janet Marana. And speaking of saying yes to the marriage, Janet has survived, or is surviving, I should say, yet another wedding planning event, right?
Well, you know, Teresa, I had my oldest daughter got married in August of 2009, and then one of my twins got married 7 months later in March of 2010. And now the other twin is finally going to get married. And if we're talking about being the mother of the bride in 3 times now, and the stress about the wedding.
And you've lived to speak about it here on the Catholic View.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I saw what goes on, you know, and such a focus is on, unfortunately, the dress, the
ceremony,
not the ceremony, but the reception.
The reception,
the reception, the party, the band or DJ, photographer, videographer, flowers. I could get dizzy with it all. And, you know, the one who's actually engaged now is the funnest story because, you know, she lives in California and she works out in LA. And, you know, she has this vision. When she first told me she got engaged, you know, we were all excited. She says, well, Mom, I want to get married on the beach. And my heart sank. And I went, Tara, you Catholic Church, you know, can't get married on the beach. Why not? Why not? They have these concepts that you can just, any old thing goes, you know? So I had to explain to her kindly and nicely about why and the sanctity of marriage and it's a sacrament and why, you know, this and that. Oh, well, we'll see. She was pacifying me now. And I says, oh, and I was praying. I had everyone praying, look, we've got to get this kid in the church. I want her. I can't watch marriage on the beach. So she came home around the holidays, you know, from California, and I said, well, we'll go looking for a dress. And I took her to Kleinfeld's, you know, where they do the famous Say Yes to the Dress show. And of course, it was in the full bloom of the whole flurry of other brides there. Of course, we did not sign up for Yes to the Dress because I didn't want to go down that road, but we're there. And the designer of one of these gowns had a trunk show, and she's just getting swept up by the excitement of all. And he actually, Henry Roth, helped pick her gown. It was pretty exciting. And so now she's standing there with this gown, and she looks at her train, and she looks back, and she tears, and I'm tearing, and she looks at me, and she says, Mom, I think I need to get married in church.
So there was some sort of a turnaround.
Turnaround.
Right?
I don't know what happened with that dress on her, but I just looked up to the Lord and I said, my prayers have been answered. Look, Lord, if you had to use a dress shopping thing to get her in church, I'll take it any way we can. But it just shows you, though, you know, my daughter's not the only one that's like this. This is very common. And unfortunately, too many couples go down that wrong road where they don't get married in church.
Well,
you know?
my experience was the same thing. It was all about, obviously we had some pre-Cana, not much, but we had some pre-Cana. But there wasn't that much talk about what was going to happen afterwards. It was mainly about planning the ceremony in terms of what readings and, you know, who was going to do what at the Mass, and then the reception where we're going to have, you know, a sit-down or a buffet. Now, I mean, it's gotten even much worse. And I'll be married, well, I'm married 29 years, thanks be to God. But now it's all about the materialism. And it drives me absolutely nuts. Now that we have reality TV, which you didn't have, you know, years ago when we were growing up, and you have the 4 Weddings program, you have Say Yes to the Dress, and there's so much emphasis on materialism.
Oh,
yeah.
On the externals.
No, there's the platinum weddings, the David Tutura's weddings, and all of these are focusing on all these elaborate place settings.
Consumerism,
Consumerism, right,
appearances, and that's all basically, it's hollow. That's not going to make a lasting marriage, and marriage really is, it's a sacrament, and it's a lifetime, and it's a giving. It's everything that the culture says it's not. Basically, it just wants to focus on just appearances, materialism, and I'm a fallout of basically my parents' marriage because they had a very short engagement. I don't think they really understood even what marriage really meant. They didn't even prepare a proper wedding, you know, even that. So I just think how many couples are going down that route without really knowing what marriage is, what they're really saying yes to, but more than anything, the beauty and the splendor of what marriage is, the gift that God wants to give to them, the gift that spouses are to each other. And so I think that it's important that couples have a preparation, and maybe it's not in their parish, but you can
in their
invite
diocese
somebody.
or archdiocese, right?
There's a wonderful study on theology of the body. I'm working on one right now. I'm studying it from Katrina Zeno called The
She's
Body.
great.
The Body Reveals
She's in
God.
the Diocese of Phoenix. She's wonderful. Yeah, she's
and
great
so
work.
many wonderful marriage prep programs all over the country that I think we need to share with our young people so that they know that this is a vocation, that it's beautiful, that it's for a lifetime. And yes, the marriage should be beautiful. I think the wedding pictures are wonderful to have, but that this should be a reflection of the glory that is the vocation, the sacrament of marriage.
Right.
It's way out of control.
It really is.
And you think about some of the costs that's involved. And to me, we've got to get back to the basics. We have to start, as you said, at the root of what marriage is all about. If we spent the time and energy that my husband and I, thanks be to God, we were able to save our marriage, and I'm pretty open about my testimony. I've given it a gazillion times. If we spent the amount of effort that we did on planning our wedding into just looking at the future and talking about our relationship with God, which wasn't really there. We were just basically C&E Catholics or Christmas and Easter Catholics. I think we could have prevented a lot of the pain that we went through.
Well, no, even with the pre-Cana experiences, you know, for my daughters, the two that are already married, the one, Kelly and Mike, they're now married, name is Piazza, they came to me after their class and they said to me, well, we were so proud of ourselves. I said, oh, really? Did you answer a lot of questions? You had a lot of information because of knowing me, and the information I've given you. They said, yeah, but guess what? Everybody there was living together. We were the only couple not living together. So Mike actually said that in the class, and he said, well, do we get extra credit?
Extra points?
Extra points. I said,
years
yes,
out
you
of
do.
purgatory?
You get extra credit with the man upstairs. That's where you get the extra credit. But the sad thing is, like you're saying, Astrid, so many couples that even when they say, okay, I'm going to get married in a church, and they sign up for pre-Cana, they don't take it seriously. They don't really see this is a real opportunity.
It's just something else that they have to check off the list. Okay, we have the caterer, we got the flowers, we got the photographer, now let's get the
satisfied, like, okay. And,
right, we can get married in the church.
And the one who I mentioned who's engaged now, preparing, she signed up for her pre-Cana. It was so funny because she calls me, she goes, Mom, we have to meet with the priest and take a test. What's the test about? Is it something I can study for? I said, no, it's a compatibility test. They're going to see how well you two are communicating. And matter of fact, communication, I think, is the key and why marriages break down. But we went to the street, Teresa, didn't we? We talked to some people.
We did. We talked to some folks about it and asked their questions. And interestingly enough, some of the people that shared with us had some trouble in terms of their marriages. They either went through a divorce and communication. But also, again, even way back when you and I were younger and thinking about marriage and whatnot, they realized, looking back now, that there was way too much emphasis on the actual event, which is really interesting. So let's take a look at what those folks had to say about saying yes to the marriage versus the dress.
Very early on, I would say we had a crisis in our engagement. And we broke our engagement, and then we reconnected. And when we reconnected, we realized that what precipitated the crisis was our inability to communicate well and effectively with one another. So in our first year of marriage, we made a marriage encounter. And the marriage encounter gave us the skills to communicate, to listen, to not judge, to receive what the other person is saying, to not jump to conclusions. So we actually learned effective communication skills.
I think the church could really help by, facilitating, talking about this, the importance of couples being able to, needing to communicate well. And I think maybe having more, they've got marriage, sort of like marriage encounter. So having that, more of those things, and encouraging couples to actually participate in those things, because at the moment it's almost like an optional extra. It's nice to do, but if you don't do it, it's okay.
Well, we were focused on the party. We had a lot of friends, and everyone was talking about the party of the decade for our wedding. Everyone was looking forward to that aspect of it. The church was just the step you had to go through to get to the party. I really wasn't practicing my Catholic faith, and neither was my fiance. Our families were Catholic, so we knew it was important to do that through the church for our families, and it was expected. We didn't have a mass. We had just a ceremony. We had thought about having a mass, but then, we were advised, like, maybe since you don't really go to mass on Sunday, maybe it's not a good idea to have a mass for your wedding. It would be uncomfortable for a lot of people. So we just did the ceremony. In fact, even in the preparation, we did do pre-Cana that was required, but we looked for the shortest program. It was a one-day event. We just went through the motions. They did talk about NFP, which we just thought was a joke because, we had already had abortions in our relationship and hadn't even addressed that and weren't even aware that there were healing programs available to us in the church at that time. So that was just another impediment, I think, to the marriage taking root, which we did end up divorcing and were annulled because we didn't have the proper information and preparation coming into it to really form a good sacrament, a sacramental union. I didn't even understand what that was. It was in the process of my life falling apart that I realized, the gift that we were offered that we didn't receive. And there would have been ways to receive it in the way it was meant to be delivered, but we weren't aware of that. So that's why I'm very happy to be able to share with people that there are, if there's anything in the way of your relationship, to address that before you get to the altar, so you are able to give yourself fully in a sacramental union. Because I think had we done that, we would have the foundation that we would have needed to ride through the storms of relationship, which come into everybody's relationship. If you have that sacramental grace to draw on, you can ride through it. But we didn't have that, and we weren't able to stay the course.
In that last segment, Patty from New Jersey pointed out the fact that they, like we were saying before, just went check, check, check down the list. They weren't taking anything seriously. And you see how that was really the root of why their marriage all fell apart.
Right.
I mean, obviously, she talked about the abortion experience, which we know unhealed, that was a big issue too. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they were just going in totally blindly, let's just have the party and da-da-da-da-da, it really led to the destruction of their marriage and the fallout.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we really want to stress, and I believe in our homework assignment we're going to have a really good website, and the USCCB has done a really good job of putting great resources up in their website all about marriage, especially because marriage is under such attack right now in so many different ways, whether it's from the culture and this emphasis on materialism and all about the wedding, or if it's the attack on marriage as God ordained it between man and a woman. Marriage is such an important thing, not only in the church, obviously, because it's a sacrament, but it really is a bedrock of society, and it's under attack. So let's take a break, and we come back. We're going to hear from a wonderful couple who is doing things, thanks be to God, the right way, starting out their marriage with solid theological guidance and really understanding the theology of the body. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching The Catholic View for Women. Teresa Tomeo, Astrid, Bennett, Gutierrez, and Janet Morana. And don't forget more information on our website at thecatholicviewforwomen.com. Stay tuned.
Well, we said in our first segment, we were talking about the pitfalls and the things that are happening and focus on reception. And we had an opportunity to chat with a couple who actually, what would you say, did it the church's way, God's way. They're Amanda and Seth Conklin. They live in Pennsylvania. And actually, Amanda works in Rachel's Vineyard Ministry with Priests for Life. A marvelous couple. And recently I had a chance to sit and kind of interview them and ask them about their experiences and how they felt about the pressures that society puts on them. So let's take a look at that clip now.
One of the things that we want to talk about is our decision to not live together before we're married, and also to not have sex until we were married. And I think the biggest reason for that decision is the sacramentality of marriage and it being an institution from God. And ever since the beginning, man was created to be married. One man, one woman. And it's a sacrament that has to bring in God. It's a sacrament from God, and it has to include God. And when you live together before you're married, or when you sleep together before you're married, you might love the person a lot, and you might want to be intimate with them, and that's all well and good. But the problem is you leave God out of it. And you can't have a sacrament without God, and you can't have marriage truly without God. So that's the problem. It's not that sex in and of itself is bad or it's dirty. It's just that you take God out of it. So it becomes selfish and disordered, and it takes what is supposed to be good and makes it about yourselves. So I think that's kind of the main reason that we decided to stick with the church's teaching on that. And also there's a lot of wisdom behind what the church teaches, and ultimately there's wisdom behind God's creation. And that's what it all comes down to, I think, is the wisdom of God's plan, not only for marriage, but how that plays out in our individual life.
It's really hard, I think, for Catholic couples to live God's will of not living together before you're married and not having sex before you're married, because the culture not only paints living together and having sex before you're married as the norm, but they paint those who don't do that as weirdos and, you know, awkward. I know that there's a show out now about people who have waited to have sex before they're married, and unfortunately the show paints them as awkward and very, you know, people that would be made fun of because they did that, and it's not true. And it's hard as Catholics also when you see other Catholics doing that, and then you think, you know, oh, well, that must be okay because so-and-so is Catholic and they're living together. So society just really makes it so hard for people like Seth and I to live out that call for God's will in our marriage.
Another thing that kind of cracks me up too with the whole secular mentality with sleeping together before you're married and just have, you know, sleep around, do whatever you want, and, you know, you don't even have to get married, whatever. If you love each other, that's enough. It's so funny because they just chase after sex like it's this pie in the sky, you know, end all be all super treasure. But then they justify their behavior by saying, oh, it's just sex. Oh, it doesn't really mean anything. So, I mean, they're caught in a contradiction. And, you know, I feel bad for them, but I also kind of find it a little bit funny. But it is sad, though, because they just have to live a contradiction. They don't know how to justify it. They try, but they always fall short. And it's because their values have fallen short from God and His wisdom and His plan for creation.
Was really focusing on the sacrament of marriage as opposed to the reception or the dress or the flowers. Those things obviously were important to me, but the most important thing was the sacrament. And it was so much that we chose a really special day to get married on. We got married on the feast day of St. Teresa of Lisieux, who is my favorite saint and one of Seth's favorite saints. And we even got to have a relic of St. Teresa at our wedding, which was such a blessing and just really tied in how important she is in our lives and how important that aspect of our Catholic faith is to us. And that was the thing that I was most excited about, was definitely the Mass. I mean, it was really nice to have the reception and to see our family and to celebrate, but that was the most literally awesome moment for both of us because we really understood what the sacrament is and the ontological change that takes place in the sacrament. So a lot of my friends who are getting married or who have gotten married are really focused on the dress and the reception, and I think that's also what leads to a lot of meltdowns, is when you're focused on that instead of the sacrament. So actually most of them were living together before they were married. One couple even had a child already together. I was really surprised to learn that one of the couples had already bought a house together, and it seems like we were we weren't the norm, you know, the fact that we weren't living together, we weren't sleeping together before we were married. And, you know, I didn't judge those other couples, but I knew that we were making the right choice for us. One of the couples, I found this very interesting and rather silly actually, had planned out their life to the T. They even told us that they were going to have their first child when they were 36, and after they bought a townhome, you know, in the country, and it was just so odd to me. It was too odd to me that they're planning their lives out that detailed, and yet they hadn't configured in the detail of not living together before they were married, and really just trying to live according to God's will, not their own, and what their idea of a perfect life would be. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, the other thing too is pre-Cana, it didn't seem that people were really preparing, unfortunately, for the sacrament. They were focused on, like you said, how they wanted their life to go and how they wanted things to work out or not work out and have everything planned out to the T, make their charts and their calculations, but they're leaving out the most important thing, which is letting God work through their marriage. It almost seemed like it was their tag team effort and that's it. You know, what they wanted, their goals, and that's it. And they missed the most fundamental aspect of pre-Cana, and it's glaringly obvious, but they just unfortunately, they didn't get it. And I think it's a testimony to how the secular mentality has just seeped into even young Catholic couples. So just because you might be raised Catholic, that doesn't really, that's not a foolproof shield from, what the culture is saying. So again, it's kind of gave me hope that there were a lot of young Catholic couples getting married, but at the same time, it's we need more Catholic teaching, I guess, and really making that practical.
Yeah, one thing that really impressed me is, separate from our pre-Cana, we did natural family planning, and there were a lot of young Catholic couples in that class.
We took a natural family planning class.
Yes. And there were a lot of young Catholic couples in there. I was very surprised. There were around 12 couples, and they were all very young. So that was very encouraging to us, even though in our pre-Cana, a lot of the couples were of the mindset where they were using contraception already and planned to use contraception into their marriage. It was rather refreshing to see our class filled for our natural family planning class. So. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And there was the spirit about, I don't know, that they seem to have all young couples. Most of them were close to our age, so early 20s. And to see them not only just there to learn about it, but they were actually excited about it. Some of them knew a little bit about it already, maybe not the scientific aspect of it, but why the church teaches it and approves of it, as opposed to contraception and things like that.
Aren't they a delightful couple? I mean, what a great example. Exactly. And this is the way to start out a marriage. Really? It really is. I mean, and I would say, unfortunately, that they're the exception and not the rule, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I think that not too many couples are getting married, so the ones that do show up to get prepared to be married are the cream of the crop. Let's try to give them the best. And I want to read a very special passage from the Bible, from Ephesians 5.
Which is so misunderstood.
Absolutely. Right. People have to look at it in the proper perspective, and we'll discuss that after. Ephesians 5:21 through 33. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband.
If we could take this and really dissect it for engaged couples, it would mean, in terms of what the church says about this and what it really means, not oppression, but this key line here, and this is what I tell women: husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. What did Christ do for the church? He died for the church.
Right.
So what society has done, and then you see the result of it, the spin out of this, a fallout where it's all about consumerism, all about me, and me looking the best and the biggest reception and yada, 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 is that, oh, you're suppressing me and you're restricting me from something, when just the opposite is true. Because when you accept that marriage and that true relationship of giving yourself totally over to the other, it's just as Christ gave himself over to the church, but he completely emptied himself. And that's not what we're taught in society, to empty ourselves for the other person.
Including during the engagement. You know, we're taught to be chaste, right? Purity, to truly love and respect the other person. And so that is how the man begins to be Christ-like, you know, for her, protecting her virtue. And so if you have a proper preparation during engagement, that is creating strong roots for a strong marriage.
And you know, if you listen to Amanda and Seth, they spoke about the pressure that they felt about other people that they came in contact with, and they even
or your daughter, the fact that she was the only one, her and Mike were the only ones in the class that weren't living together.
I know. And the same really was the experience for Amanda and Seth too, until they got to their NFP class where they actually met couples who were really like glad to be there, wanting, not contracepting, wanting to, do the churches the right way. But the pressures are just tremendous out there, just peer to peer among these people. And I think Amanda and Seth also said, like, you kind of feel like you're the nerds of the group because you haven't had sex, and you're not sleeping together and you're not living together. And so it's hard. But I think for those who do it the right way, there's a joy they have. The way they spoke about bringing the saints into their marriage, having the relic there on the altar during their mass. You could see that that was what was important.
I couldn't even imagine thinking that beautifully and clearly about all these different steps in the actual wedding mass.
Right.
That is so incredible. I mean, God bless them.
I know.
We only have about a minute and a half left, so let's wrap up. Teach with our homework assignment.
All right. Well, first, I want to remind everyone for a perfect
Our
wedding,
Lady.
a perfect wedding gift is our Madonna of the kitchen, so that they start their kitchen off on the right step. And also, too, there's so much information here that they have to go to our website as their homework. And first of all, they're going to have links to different websites, starting with the usccbs.org marriage prep, read and study. Then there's also another website, Marriage Unique for a Reason.org.
Yep, that's within USCCB. It's
that's
great.
That's right. Then there's a couple, Greg and Julie Alexander, and they have a beautiful marriage ministry, and their website is the alexanderhouse.org, which is wonderful. And then finally, there's one more thing. Of course, Damien Owens has an excellent marriage prep program called joyfulmarriagenj.org.
Right, and Damon is now the executive director of the Theology of the Body Institute and my partner at the March for Life every year. Right. So great resources. Check these out. If you know someone who's getting married in your family, please go to CatholicViewForWomen.com and share these resources. And tell them about our show. And we'll see you next time on The Catholic View for Women. Have a blessed day.